Ever feel like you're dragging by, like midday, even with all the gadgets and gizmos that are supposed to be saving us time?
Cool.
Well, today's deep dive is all about you. We're going to tackle why you're so tired, and trust me, it goes way deeper than just how much sleep you snagged last night.
Right. It's such a weird paradox when you think about it. Our brains are still basically wired for life on the savannah, but here we are juggling notifications, deadlines, the whole nine yards. It's no wonder things feel a bit off sometimes.
Totally. Speaking of juggling, the research you sent over, 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000. That's more choices than a menu at a mega diner. Are you kidding me? Is it any wonder we're like mentally spent before we even hit dinner?
35,000. Yeah, that number always gets me. But it really highlights this whole concept of decision fatigue. Basically, every choice we make, even the tiny ones, they all tap into our brain's control center, the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, go on.
Well, think of it like a muscle. Overuse it, and it gets tired, just like your legs after a marathon, right? It's not about willpower. It's about your brain literally running out of gas.
So it's not just me being dramatic when I say my brain feels fried after a day of back-to-back meetings and errands. It's a real thing.
Oh, it's definitely a real thing. And you know what's even more interesting? The way our brains actually deal with all this constant decision making, it produces this stuff called glutamate. It's basically like a messenger between brain cells, but too much glutamate. That's when things get messy. Think of it like traffic piling up during rush hour. Things slow down. It gets harder to function.
Okay, too much mental chatter, too much traffic in our brains. Now, that's an image I can get behind. This explains so much about those days where even picking out what to eat feels impossible. But before I surrender to the chaos, tell me there's something we can actually do about this, please.
Oh, absolutely. One of the best things you can do is actually pretty simple. Simplify. Be more intentional with your choices, you know? Think about Steve Jobs and that black turtleneck he always wore.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just a fashion quirk, it was a strategy. By simplifying his wardrobe, he freed up mental space for the bigger things, designing the next iPhone, you know?
Wow, talk about food for thought. Maybe those endless hours I spent scrolling through online shopping options are doing more harm than good. Seriously, I'm starting to rethink my whole approach to decision-making.
And you're not alone. This whole idea of mindful decision making, it goes way back. Einstein, Mark Zuckerberg, they've all embraced minimalist wardrobes to streamline their lives. But think beyond clothing, too. What about meal prepping for the week? Takes the what's for dinner dilemma off the table, right?
Right.
Creating a morning routine minimizes those early morning choices. It's all about being intentional with your energy.
Like giving your brain a break instead of burning energy on every little thing. I like it.
Uh,
But what about the bigger picture here? We're wired to make choices, to analyze our surroundings and in our nature. How does this modern world, with its like constant information overload, play into all of this?
That's where things get even more interesting. You've hit upon this idea of evolutionary mismatch.
Hmm.
Our brains, amazing as they are still basically optimized for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But now they're trying to navigate the complexities of the 21st century. Imagine a Stone Age hunter suddenly dropped into Times Square.
Oh man, sensory overload.
Exactly. That's essentially what our brains are dealing with every single day.
Poor Johnny Caveman wouldn't last 5 minutes with our to-do lists and news feeds.
Mhm.
But seriously, are you saying this mismatch is a key factor in why so many of us feel constantly exhausted?
Huge role. Think about it. Our ancestors faced physical fatigue for sure, but they didn't have the constant mental drain of endless information, choices, stimuli. Their brains weren't wired for this, and neither are ours, at least not yet.
Makes you wonder.
It does. So it's really no wonder we hit that wall, that feeling of being completely brained, even if we haven't really done that much physically.
Yeah. It's like we're trying to run a marathon with like a Stone Age toolkit. We've got the ambition, but not necessarily the right equipment for the job. But speaking of energy reserves, let's talk about the ultimate power down, sleep. We all know we need it, but what's actually going on in our brains while we're off in dreamland?
Ah, sleep. It's the ultimate brain reboot, isn't it? While we're catching those Z's, our brains are actually hard at work doing some serious housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Remember that glutamate buildup we talked about? All that mental
Oh.
traffic? Well, sleep is when our brains finally take out the trash.
Wait, so my brain has its own cleaning crew?
In a way, it does. There's this incredible system called the lymphatic system, and it acts like a brain cleaning crew, basically. It flushes out waste products and toxins that accumulate throughout the day.
So while I'm sleeping, my brain is doing some serious decluttering. No wonder I usually wake up feeling a little more human.
It's not just about feeling more human, it's about optimizing brain function. Studies show that getting enough sleep actually improves memory, focus, even our ability to regulate our emotions. It's like hitting the reset button, mentally and emotionally.
Sign me up for a lifetime subscription to Sleeptopia. That sounds amazing. But let's be real, we don't live in a perfect world. We've got deadlines, late-night scrolling sessions, maybe one too many episodes of whatever we're binging. What happens when we skimp on sleep? When that cleaning crew can't quite get to everything?
That's when things can start to unravel a bit, yeah. Remember adenosine, that sleep-inducing molecule our brains produce throughout the day?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Right, so as the day goes on, adenosine builds up, and it's basically signaling to our brains, time to wind down, buddy. But when we don't get enough sleep, those adenosine levels stay high, and that contributes to feeling groggy and mentally sluggish, like trying to run your car on fumes, you
Oh,
know?
I've been there.
Yeah.
Hitting that wall after days, sometimes weeks, of not enough sleep. It's not pretty. But even when we try to prioritize sleep, there's this little thing called technology. And it always seems to be working against us. The article you shared mentioned something about melatonin and how our devices can interfere with sleep. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, the blue light dilemma. Our phones, tablets, computers, they all emit this blue light, and it's a sneaky saboteur of sleep. Basically, it suppresses the production of melatonin,
Melatonin being,
the hormone that helps regulate our natural sleep-wake cycle. When we expose ourselves to blue light at night, it's like we're sending these mixed signals to our brains, telling them it's still daytime when it should be winding down for sleep.
so it's like trying to sleep with the lights on, only it's our devices casting the sleep-disrupting glare.
Hmm.
This is kind of depressing. So we're dealing with decision fatigue, information overload, and now we're battling our own biology, thanks to our tech-filled lives.
It's the reality, unfortunately. Our modern habits often clash with our natural sleep patterns, and when you add in the fact that we're all wired a little differently when it comes to sleep, things get even more interesting.
You're talking about chronotypes, right? That whole early bird versus night owl thing.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by how some people naturally wake up with the sunrise while others, come alive after dark.
Exactly. Our chronotypes, those internal clocks that dictate our sleep-wake preferences, play a huge role in how we experience fatigue. They're mostly influenced by our genes, and they impact asterisk when asterisk we feel most alert, when our energy levels naturally dip, and of course, when we're most likely to crave a good nap.
So we've got these internal clocks, they're ticking away, telling us time to sleep, wake up. But then the modern world's like, nope, got to stick to the schedule.
Yeah.
No wonder so many of us feel like we're living on someone asterisk else's asterisk time zone, right?
Okay.
I'm starting to see how understanding my own chronotype could be a game changer, though. Like really understanding it.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine trying to force a night owl, someone who naturally comes alive at night, to be productive at 6 a.m. when their brain's still half asleep. Or on the flip side, asking an early bird to tackle a super complex project at 10 p.m. when they're normally winding down.
Yeah. Setting yourself up for failure, basically.
Right. Recipe for frustration, burnout, and a whole lot of fatigue. But here's the good news. Even small adjustments, when they're in sync with your chronotype, can make a huge difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of adjustments are we talking about? Lay it on me.
It's about working asterisk with asterisk your natural rhythms, those peaks and valleys of energy we all have. If you're a night owl, maybe you can, shift some of your most demanding work to the evenings when you're naturally more focused and alert. Or if you're an early bird, you capitalize on those super productive morning hours.
I like that. Tackle the tough stuff while the rest of the world's still hitting the snooze button.
Exactly.
But what about the things we can't necessarily control? Like, not everyone can set their own hours, even if they know their chronotype like the back of their hand. Any advice for those folks who might be feeling stuck?
I hear you. That's where those small strategic tweaks can really come in handy. Even within a structured schedule, there's often some wiggle room, even if it's just a little.
Okay.
Maybe you could talk to your boss about shifting your hours even slightly, or maybe you become more intentional about how you structure your day asterisk outside asterisk of work scheduling activities, errands, all that to match up with those natural energy peaks and dips we talked about.
So taking ownership, even if we don't have total control. I dig it. It sounds like we've got a whole arsenal of fatigue-fighting tools here, simplifying our choices, prioritizing sleep, respecting those internal clocks.
Don't forget about those coffee naps.
Oh, right. Those are definitely happening in my future. But seriously, this is empowering. Like, we're not just victims of our own exhaustion.
Not at all. For too long, fatigue has been treated like a personal failing, like a sign of weakness. But it's way more complex than that. Our brains are phenomenal, truly, but they're finite. And we're asking a lot of them, especially in this day and age. They're constantly adapting to a world that often feels, well, at odds with how they naturally operate.
It's like we've been trying to outrun exhaustion instead of, like, stopping for a second, understanding where it's coming from, and actually addressing it at the source. But today's deep dive, I feel like it's given me a whole new playbook.
That's what we're here for.
Seriously, I feel like I have a better grasp on asterisk, why asterisk, I get tired, which is huge, but also what I can do about it, which is even bigger.
You got it. Knowledge is power, my friend, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as our energy levels. When you understand the why behind the fatigue, you can go from feeling powerless to empowered. You start making choices that actually support your well-being, not drain it.
It's about recognizing that feeling tired isn't a defect. It's often a signal, like, hey, something needs to change here. Maybe it's those late-night scrolling sessions. Maybe it's how we approach decisions. Maybe it's time to invest in some blackout curtains.
Maybe it's all of the above, and honestly, even small adjustments, they can have a ripple effect. More energy, better focus, and just a greater sense of well-being overall.
Music to my ears. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, and maybe even inspired a few more naps in my future.
There you go. And who knows, you might even find yourself, like, inspired to experiment with a coffee nap or two.
Now you're speaking my language. But before we wrap up, gotta leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. If our brains are constantly flooded with information, choices, the whole shebang, what impact might that be having on our collective mental energy, like as a society? Something to chew on as we navigate this increasingly demanding world. Until our next deep dive.